I'm going to talk about some of the ways you can change how the camera focuses depending on the subject. If you have an SLR camera, then the first choice you have is between manual focus, where you turn the focus ring on the lens, and autofocus, where the camera focuses for you. You can change between these two modes, usually by using a switch on the camera lens or the camera body. The switch is marked AF for autofocus or MF for manual focus. It's possible it will be on a menu in your camera. If you ever find that the camera's autofocus is not working as you'd expect, then check that this switch hasn't got knocked into the wrong position. Normally manual focus we don't use because autofocus works very well, but there are times when manual focus is useful, such as for macro or very close-up photography, when you want to focus on a very specific part of the subject, or perhaps at night, for instance taking pictures of fireworks where there's not enough light for autofocus. It's worth knowing how to use manual focus because it can be very helpful. If autofocus isn't working, it's switching, it's not focusing on the thing you want it to focus on, then just change into manual focus. So to experiment with that, switch into MF on the lens or the camera body, or possibly in the menu, and have a look at the lens and find the two rings. Now there's the zoom ring, which you're already familiar with, which zooms you in and out, and that's probably the wider ring. But there's also a focus ring, which may well be on the front of the camera, as in this diagram. It may, however, be on the other side of the zoom ring. So once you've zoomed into your subject, then to focus, you turn the focus ring, which should turn fairly freely, and you can fine-tune it, turn it to focus in and out. At one end it will focus on infinity, and you turn it all the way the other way, and down the other end it will focus on the minimum distance for that lens. You still can't focus closer than that minimum distance. If you wear glasses, you can get the camera to compensate for your eyesight in the same way the glasses can. So get the viewfinder to compensate using something called the Diopter adjustment, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But once you've finished experimenting with the manual focus, do remember to put that switch back into autofocus, because otherwise your subsequent photos may not be in focus. So the Diopter adjustment may well be hidden just under the rubber cup in the viewfinder. You may just have to lift up the edge slightly to see it. But it's very useful if your eyes aren't perfect and you don't want to use your glasses. You want to be able to focus the camera, particularly in manual focus, without using your glasses. It only changes how you see the scene. It doesn't do anything to the camera. So to set the diopter adjustment, set the camera very still and solid somewhere. You don't want the camera moving. On a tripod if you have one, or on a table or something if you don't. And point it at something fairly flat but that has got a texture. If it's completely flat and plain, the camera won't be able to focus. So focus on something with colour or texture, and press the shutter button halfway down so that you can autofocus. And just check that the camera has focused. You've got that confirmation. So now the camera thinks it's focused, so what you want to do is turn the diopter adjustment while looking down the viewfinder so that it looks in focus to your eye as well. So most of the time we'll use autofocus, and there are ways where you can optimize the type of focus depending on the subject that you're photographing. And these are autofocus modes and autofocus points. Autofocus modes allow you to change how your camera focuses for still or moving subjects. You may not have all of them, but they are single focus, or one shot, for the still subject, continuous focus for the moving subject, and automatic autofocus, which tries to be the best of both worlds and adapt for your subject. To change the AF mode, the autofocus mode, you're looking for something that says AF, possibly AF mode. In Canon it's likely to be in a shooting menu, and the things you're looking for are one shot, AI focus, AI servo. Nikon's may have a rotary switch on the front, or the options may be in a menu, and the options are called something different. Canon have their own terminology. Other manufacturers call the option something different. So I'll go through each option. So first of all, single focus, where you've got a still subject. This is AFS for most manufacturers, but Canon call this one shot. And it may well be the default on your DSLR. Then there's continuous focus, and if you've got a moving subject, especially if it's coming towards you, then the subject may change, the camera may need to change its focus as the subject moves. And continuous focus tries to lock onto the subject and change the focus with the movement. So Nikon, Sony call this AFC for continuous, Canon call this AI servo. So it's very useful for pets or children, but it's not always necessarily going to work brilliantly, because it tries to predict where the subject's going to move to, and it may get it wrong. And it uses a lot of battery because it's continuously changing the focus. So the manufacturers came up with this automatic autofocus, which tries to be the best of both worlds, ready for anything, and detect. So if you've got a still subject, it will not wear the battery out, moving the lens, but if it detects motion, then it will jump into a continuous focus mode. Nikon, Sony, etc. call this AFA. Canon call this AI focus. That's auto intelligent focus. Now if you've got a CSC or a compact, this may be your default focus mode. Some of the older DSLRs don't have this mode. So to summarise, your camera may have 3 focus modes: single focus or one shot for still subjects, continuous focus that tracks a moving subject, and automatic autofocus which switches between the two. If you have got the automatic autofocus, in other words AFA or Canon's AI focus, then try it. It may work very well and you may not have to worry about changing modes, etc. But if you find that it doesn't work the way you want it, and if you're trying to pan the subject, it may not work properly, then change your focus mode and use single focus for still subjects or continuous for moving. And if you're panning, you'll probably want single focus mode.